Hello, welcome to Culture Hash. Today we're going to review the debut album from Nilüfer Yanya, Miss Universe. Nilüfer Yanya is a 23-year-old singer-songwriter from London. Her style is quite broad and Miss Universe touches on a variety of genres. This includes bedroom pop, synthpop, indie, and some elements of lo-fi. Broadly speaking, the majority of tracks on Miss Universe can be considered guitar music, but there are strong pop sensibilities on each track, and there are very strong hooks to support these. There's an interesting contrast between tracks like In Your Head, which is rock inspired and quite heavy, when compared to Heat Rises, which is more synthy and doesn't really feature any guitars. Nilüfer Yanya's career's moved quite quickly in the 3 years since she dropped her first single. 2 years ago she was gaining a lot of attention on the internet with tracks like Golden Cage and Baby Love. This buzz helped Nilüfer Yanya land a place on BBC's Sound of 2018 long list, an annual list the BBC puts together of up-and-coming artists. 2018 saw Nilüfer Yanya listed alongside Notes, Young Bane, Lewis Capaldi, and Superorganism. All of these artists have gone on to do some really interesting things within music, and Nilüfer Yanya is no different. Nilüfer Yanya has always had great potential as an artist, and we can see this coming to fruition on Miss Universe. Miss Universe is a great debut from Nilüfer Yanya, and she masterfully tackles this variety of genres that she's laid out across the album. The album opens with WA Health and establishes the loose concept that ties the album together. WA Health stands for We Worry About Your Health, and this is expanded upon across several tracks on this album. And each of these skit tracks features a robotic female voice, and the concept is that this is just a spoof of these social media gurus that give people just platitudes and quotes to help them improve themselves. Skits, like Experience, leads quite nicely into the following track, Paradise, and even though these interludes break up the album, they feel a bit superfluous and aren't really needed. The first proper song on the album is In Your Head. This is quite a riotous, loud piece of indie rock. Nilüfer Yanya's vocals sound a lot different on this, they're a lot lower, and it suits this more rock-inspired track. The guitar comes in and out quite nicely, and there's some pulsing percussion to keep the tempo high and the energy up. Following that, we get the track Paralysed, which is a lot slower and acts as a nice breather after the big intro from In Your Head. Paralysed has got a nice mid-tempo groove, and there's some great guitar work in the background. It builds up towards the end of the track, and there's quite a nice guitar solo that comes in towards the end. The instrumental is quite subtle and chilled on this track, and it works quite nicely, just subtly bringing the energy down a little bit on the album so far. Following Paralysed, we get the song Angels, which wraps up this nice little trilogy of opening tracks. Angels is a nice stop-start piece of indie rock. The intensity builds quite nicely into the choruses, and then following these choruses it sort of just drops out slightly and just lowers the tempo a little bit. I really like the intensity of this track and how the tension's built and released throughout it. Angels nicely wraps up this trifecta of gripping tracks that opens up Miss Universe. The middle section of Miss Universe features a couple of standout tracks, Heat Rises being most notable. There's a creepy, synthy bass line that dominates the instrumental and reminds me of something out of an early New Order album, especially the track Chosen Time. Underneath this bass line, there's some scatty drums that feel like they've come just out of Millionaire by Khalees and Andre 3000. Nilüfer Yanya begins her verses with the catchy refrain, "Getting high just from the heat," and her vocals really suit this echoey, haunting soundscape that's created on Heat Rises. Following Heat Rises is Melt, another 80s inspired cut. Melt has got some nice jazzy horns, and it feels a bit like Sade's Smooth Operator, but with Hotline Bling's drums underneath it. Melt is another highlight for the sultry atmosphere created on the track. Safety Net is another fantastic 80s inspired track. There's some great synths on here, and I love how it rises quite nicely towards the end with some interesting whistle effects on there. Towards the end of Miss Universe we have the track Tears, a great slice of 80s inspired pop. There's some great lines on this track. I love when Nilüfer Yanya says, "I'll be lying in a pool of someone else's blood, saying it's not my fault if someone gets hurt." The synths are brilliant on this track, and I love just the spacey, like clubby feels it's got. It feels like a nice mid-tempo club banger, if that's even a thing. There's definitely a healthy slice of house influence on this track, and it feels ready-made for the dance floor. Heavyweight Champion of the Year is the closer and breakout track from this album. This is a guitar-led track that builds up quite nicely towards the end. It sort of becomes a bit sparser towards the middle and then just breaks out again with all this power. In that final part, Nilüfer Yanya just rocks out. There's just big crescendo to end the album, and it just fades out so nicely and just closes everything off. Heavyweight Champion of the Year shows that she's got serious rock credential and that her sound isn't primarily based on these synths. It's a great way to close the album, and it showcases Nilüfer Yanya's style perfectly. Overall, I really enjoyed Miss Universe. I think it's one of the best debut albums I've heard this year so far. And Nilüfer Yanya's just got a masterful grip on this synth pop and indie sound that she's perfected. Towards the end, there's some ballads that don't really seem to go anywhere. Tracks like Monsters Under the Bed don't really feel like they contribute too much to the overall sound of the album. They're harmless, just a bit forgettable compared to some of the highs on the other tracks on Miss Universe. But this is an album that I really enjoyed, and for me, I'm going to give Nilüfer Yanya, Miss Universe, 8 out of 10.